How do you build a countries in a place where the water keeps trying to take the land back? The Dutch answer is not to run from the water. It is to negotiate with it, measure it, redirect it, vote about it, pump it, hold it behind gates, let it in when useful, and remove it when necessary. From a distance, the Netherlands can look almost too calm for such an argument. Fields lie flat under enormous skies. Canals reflect brick houses without a ripple. Bicycles move through cities with the quiet confidence of people following paths laid out long before sunrise. Windmills turn where tourists expect windmills to turn. Tulips flare into color in spring. Everything appears composed, but the calm is engineered. Roughly a quarter of the country lies below sea level. Without its network of dunes, dikes, barriers, pumps, sluices, canals, and managed river systems, far more of the Netherlands would be exposed to flooding. Water is not a distant environmental issue here. It sits inside politics, urban design, agriculture, memory, work, and even democracy itself. The country still has elected water authorities, whose job is exactly what the name suggests: manage water, maintain defenses, control levels, and keep an old national bargain functioning. The scale of that bargain is easy to miss. Dutch landscapes rarely announce danger. There is no mountain wall separating safety from risk, no canyon edge where the problem becomes visible. Often the difference between a dry living room and floodwater is a line of grass, a pumping station, a closed gate, a forecast, or a decision made hours earlier by people the public may never meet. That invisibility is part of the story. The map may look settled. The relationship beneath it is not. Every generation inherits both the protection and the obligation to rethink it, and the story is still changing. Heavier rain, drought, and river extremes mean the system cannot simply preserve old solutions forever. The Netherlands has to keep redesigning the redesign. That bargain has produced things that sound almost imaginary. A lake drained and turned into a geometric landscape. A defense system designed to flood its own countryside. 19 windmills that are not ornaments but parts of a hydraulic machine. Storm barriers whose moving arms are wider than buildings. A road running for 32 kilometers across what used to be open sea. A steam pumping station from another age that still has a job to do. And somewhere in this country, there is an island that no longer has a sea around it. That is the mystery to carry with us. How does an island lose its sea? To answer it, we have to start where most people think they already understand: the Netherlands. Amsterdam. At first light, Amsterdam is quieter than its reputation. The canal water is dark and nearly motionless. A delivery bicycle crosses a narrow bridge. A curtain opens on a houseboat. Somewhere behind a row of 17th century facades, cup-touch saucers. A tram bell sounds once, and the city begins another ordinary morning beside water. The canals are beautiful, yes, but beauty is almost the least interesting thing about them. Amsterdam's canal ring grew from a major expansion plan during the late 16th and 17th centuries, when the city was becoming a global port and needed transport, more drainage, more defenses, and a more organized way to build. The result was not simply a picturesque necklace around an old center. It was an urban system. Water became street, boundary, infrastructure, route, storage edge, and organizing geometry all at once. Look closely at the buildings, and the physical negotiation becomes obvious. Narrow plots press against canal fronts. Bridges rise and fall over water that divides one block from another. Boats still move through spaces where carts and trucks cannot. Residents step from front doors and find themselves inches from a canal edge. Houseboats turn what appears to be public water into something domestic. A kitchen window at eye level with passing ducks. A bicycle chained to a railing above the hull. A plant pot trembling when a boat wakes the water. There is a temptation to describe Amsterdam as a city floating on water. It does not float. That would be simpler. It stands because generations before the current residents made the ground, the foundations, the drainage, and the canals work together well enough for ordinary life to forget how complicated the arrangement is. That is one of the strangest things about Dutch engineering. When it succeeds, it disappears into habit. A commuter does not wake thinking about 17th century hydraulic planning. She checks the weather, unlocks her bicycle, crosses a bridge, and keeps going. The water below her is history, infrastructure, danger, and scenery at the same time. At street level, another detail gives the system texture. The canal edge is never far away. Rainwater runs toward drains. Basement doors sit lower than the pavement. Old masonry has been repaired, repointed, adjusted. The city is elegant, but it is not effortless. Its beauty rests on continual work that most visitors never notice. This is Amsterdam, a city that learned to make water part of the address. And once a country learns to organize itself around water, another possibility appears. What if water could be controlled, not only for trade and daily life, but for war? Outside the postcard cities, some of the Netherlands' quietest landscapes were once designed as weapons. A grassy embankment, a line of trees, a low fort half hidden under earth, a canal too still to suggest danger. At first glance, the Dutch water defense lines can feel almost pastoral. Cyclists pass, reeds lean in the wind. Then the geometry begins to reveal itself. Dikes, fortified positions, carefully controlled elevations. This defensive landscape stretches for more than 200 kilometers. Its logic is both simple and deeply strange. Instead of trying to build walls high enough to stop an invading army, Dutch engineers could use controlled flooding. Open the right sluices, move the right water, and fields that looked harmless could become an obstacle. Not deep enough for ordinary boats. Too deep, unstable, and muddy for soldiers, carts, and heavy equipment to cross efficiently. The landscape itself became the fortification. There is something almost mythical about the idea, because it reverses the country's usual story. We think of the Dutch as people forever holding water back. Here they invited it in. The science, however, is brutally practical. Controlled inundation depended on knowing the land with extraordinary precision. A few differences in elevation mattered. Water had to arrive where it was wanted and stop where it was not. Forts guarded the routes that remained passable. Sluices became military instruments. Topography, engineering, and strategy folded into one another until the countryside was part of the defense plan. And the mentality behind that system never completely vanished. Water management in the Netherlands is still civic infrastructure on a scale others often underestimate. The country has elected water authorities, institutions responsible for tasks such as maintaining dikes, managing water levels, and treating wastewater. People vote for bodies whose responsibilities include the height of the water outside their homes. That sounds unusual only until you stand here. In a low country, water is not background. It is jurisdiction. A cyclist rolls over one of these old defense routes now. The fort is quiet. The sluice is no longer waiting for an army. Nothing about the scene feels militarized. That is the emotional retreat after the revelation. A dog pulls on its leash, grass moves, a gate creaks. Imagine being responsible for one sluice in such a system. The task is not heroic in appearance. You watch levels, inspect a gate, clear debris, record a reading. Yet one small mechanism may determine whether water reaches the right field at the right depth. In this landscape, precision is what turns floodwater from chaos into strategy. This is Dutch defense, not against water, but with it. And if the Dutch could deliberately put water onto land, then sooner or later, someone had to ask the opposite question. Could they take the water away? From the air, Beemster looks less like countryside than a drawing. Long roads cross long canals at measured angles. Fields repeat in rectangles. Farmhouses sit where geometry seems to expect them. The horizon is wide and low, but the pattern beneath it feels almost architectural, as though someone laid a ruler across a lake and decided where land should go. That is close to what happened. Beemster was once water. In the early 17th century, the lake was drained, and by 1612 a new polder landscape had emerged. Wind-powered pumping and hydraulic engineering removed the water, while surveyors and planners imposed an orderly pattern of roads, canals, plots, and settlements. Renaissance ideas about proportion and rational design found an extraordinary canvas here. Not a palace facade, not a formal garden, but an entire landscape. The claims is not that humans created matter from nothing. They did something more laborious. They turned water into usable ground, and then accepted the permanent obligation to keep that ground dry. That second part matters. Reclamation is often described as conquest because conquest has a dramatic ending. A flag goes up. The battle is over. Polders do not work that way. Water must continue to be managed. Ditches need clearing. Pumps need power. Dikes need inspection. Levels change with rain, river conditions, and the sea beyond the horizon. The victory, if that word belongs here at all, has to be renewed. A farmer crosses one of Beemster's straight roads in a small tractor. From above, the vehicle barely interrupts the geometry. At ground level, the landscape is much less abstract. Soil sticks to tires. Water sits dark in the drainage canals. Wind pushes across fields with almost nothing to slow it down. A farmhouse window reflects a sky that seems larger than the building beneath it. Why build a landscape this carefully? Because once land is no longer given, every meter has to be understood. The old lake is not visible in any obvious way. That may be the most unsettling detail. There is no theatrical scar announcing what happened here. You have to know that the water is gone. Then the entire scene changes. A field becomes a former lakebed. A ditch becomes part of a national habit. A straight road becomes evidence of intention. Even the weather changes how the geometry feels. After heavy rain, drainage channels become visibly fuller, and the dark water makes the grid sharper. During dry periods, the same system has to help retain enough water for crops and soil. The polder is not simply kept dry. It is kept within a narrow range that life can use. This is Beemster, land that began as an idea on paper. And then spring arrives, and the Dutch take that engineered ground and turn it into color. The first thing you notice in the flower region should not be the fields. It should be the hands. Hands tying stems to a frame, hands sorting blooms by shade, hands reaching into crates. Hands working late under artificial light slowly acquires feathers, scales, wheels, wings, whatever shape this year's parade demands. Outside, the air is cold enough to sharpen the smell of wet soil. This is the Bollenstreek in spring, the bulb-growing region around places such as Lys, where tulips and other flowering bulbs turn agricultural land into bands of reddo, pink, white, and violet. From above, the fields can look unreal, as though color has been laid onto the ground with a broad brush. But every stripe is work. Bulb cultivation here, climate timing, drainage, knowledge accumulated across generations, and a short season that refuses to wait for anyone. Spring does not arrive as a decorative event. It arrives as a deadline. The Dutch flower parades, or Corso culture, make that relationship visible in another way. Communities build enormous floats and muting sculptures covered with flowers and other plant material. Volunteers work on designs that may pass through towns for only a few hours before the flowers begin their inevitable decline. It is beautiful because it is temporary. That matters in a country obsessed with permanence. Dikes are built to endure. Pumps are maintained for decades. Roads are measured. Water levels are managed. But here, people spend weeks constructing something that cannot last. A volunteer steps back from the float, notices a gap, and presses one more flower into place. No speech, no explanation. Just the small correction of someone who wants the pattern right before morning. The tulip itself carries stories about arrival, trade, speculation, fashion, and national identity, some of them cleaner in popular memory than they are in history. Better to let the verified reality be enough. This region has become one of the world's most recognizable cultivated landscapes, and its seasonal rhythm still shapes work and community life. When parade day comes, the labor becomes movement. A float that spent hours under fluorescent workshop lights emerges into the street, surrounded by families, volunteers, music, bicycles, and people leaning from windows. By evening, petals are already softening at the edges. The whole celebration carries its own expiration date, and everyone knows it. Somewhere farther east, there is a former island waiting in the middle of a field. We are not there yet. This is Bollenstreek, spring turned into architecture. But the Netherlands is not only a country that designs landscapes. It designs movement too, and to see that leave the flowers behind, and enter a place where 12,000 bicycles can vanish under one station. In Utrecht, the spectacle is not speed. It is order. A commuter rolls down a ramp beneath station spleen, brakes lightly, scans rows of bicycles, turns into an aisle, finds a place, locks the frame, and walks toward the railway platforms. The whole sequence may take only a few minutes. Nothing about it feels remarkable to the person doing it. That is exactly why it is remarkable. The bicycle parking facility beside Utrecht Central has space for around 12,500 bicycles and has been described by the city as the largest bicycle parking facility in the world. 3 levels of parking sit beside one of the busiest transport hubs in the country. Ramps are designed so cyclists can keep moving. Signs direct them to available spaces. Bicycle storage and rail travel are treated as parts of the same journey. This is not a lifestyle advertisement. It is infrastructure. The Dutch cycle enormous distances collectively each year, but statistics alone miss the texture. A parent rides with a child seated upright behind the handlebars. An office worker pedals through rain in a coat, designed for exactly this inconvenience. A student balances a bag against one hip. At an intersection, dozens of people accelerate when the light changes, not as a sporting event, not as a weekend activity, but because this is how they are getting somewhere. Weather does not cancel the system. It becomes part of the clothing, the timing, the route, the habit. And that ordinary competence grows from design. Dedicated lanes, parking, traffic calming, station integration. Each element lowers the friction of choosing a bicycle until cycling becomes less a statement than a default. If you already knew a bicycle garage could feel like infrastructure on the scale of an airport, tell me below. Most people do not. Then tires hiss over concrete. A bell rings once. A train announcement leaks down from above. Someone laughs while trying to remember where they parked. There is no epic soundtrack in the real scene. There does not need to be. The deeper point is not that Dutch people are somehow born better at cycling. They are responding to a system that makes the behavior practical. Change the junction design, the parking, the legal priority, the connection to trains, and daily choices change with them. Culture and infrastructure keep reinforcing each other until the unusual becomes ordinary. This is Utrecht, movement designed around 2 wheels. And long before bicycles became machines of daily Dutch life, another kind of machine was already turning in the wind, lifting water one measured rotation at a time. At Kinderdijk, the windmills rise exactly where the imagination expects them. Tall black silhouettes, long blades, water channels reflecting the sky, reeds trembling along narrow banks. In mist, the scene can look almost too perfect, a national symbol arranged for the camera. Then a gear begins to move. Kinderdijk contains 19 historic windmills within a larger hydraulic landscape of polders, canals, dikes, sluices, and pumping systems. These mills were built to do work. Their purpose was to move water, helping drain lowland so people could farm and live where gravity alone would not keep the ground dry. The postcard was a machine all along. There is an old folktale connected to the name Kinderdijk. The story of a baby found alive in a cradle after the St. Elizabeth flood, with a cat said to have kept the cradle balanced on the water. It is a legend, not a verified historical event, but legends survive because they compress fear into an image small to remember: floodwater, a floating cradle, a child, a cat. The engineering answer to that fear is less poetic and more impressive. Water levels are controlled through a layered system. Mills transfer water from lower polders into higher channels. Dikes hold boundaries, sluices regulate movement. Later pumping technology joins the older system. Every component makes sense only because it connects to something else. A miller climbs inside one of the structures and checks timber, sailcloth, gears, and moving parts. The work is intimate. Wood expands and contracts. Wind direction matters, sound matters. A change in the rhythm of the mechanisms can say more than a gauge. Outside, tourists photograph the blades. Someone listens. That contrast gives Kinderdijk its real power. Heritage here is not the preservation of a pretty object. It is the preservation of knowledge about how the object survives and what it was built to do. After the flood story, step down emotionally. A wooden gear turns, dust shifts. A rope tightens, the same sound repeats. Again, the mills also reveal a cost hidden by the postcard. Timber needs protection from weather. Sails and mechanisms need attention. A structure built to work in wind is constantly being worked on by wind. Preservation means accepting that the landscape is never finished, only kept in operating condition by the next inspection, the next repair, the next pair of hands. This is Kinderdijk. The postcard was a machine all along, but wooden blades can only move so much water. Farther west, where one of Europe's great ports meets the North Sea system, the Netherlands builds on a scale that makes a windmill feel almost delicate. Near Rotterdam, the Maesland barrier waits in an open position. That is how it spends most of its life. Two enormous white arms rest beside the waterway, leaving ships free to pass between the North Sea and the port. From a distance, the structures look large. Stand near them and scale becomes difficult to process. Each gate is roughly 210 meters wide. The moving components are among the largest ever used in a flood barrier. A maintenance worker walking near the steel disappears into the geometry, and this machine is designed to move only when the situation becomes serious. The Maeslandkering is part of the Dutch flood protection system for the densely populated and economically crucial region around Rotterdam. When a dangerous storm surge is forecast, the barrier can close across the new waterway. Its huge gates move into position, fill with water, sink and block the surge. The system is designed for conditions involving water levels far beyond an ordinary high tide. The engineering facts can be delivered dryly. Gate dimensions, forecast thresholds, structural loads, maintenance cycles. Then the voltage changes. These are not doors in a wall. They are pieces of a city-sized machine waiting for the sea to rise. Operational teams, the structure, weather, water, and machinery. Maintenance is continuous because the barrier's importance lies in what happens on the rare day it is needed. Most of the time, nothing dramatic occurs. Paint is inspected, systems are tested, components are checked. People do the slow work required to make one extraordinary movement reliable. This is a recurring Dutch pattern. The visible miracle depends on invisible maintenance. A container ship passes between the open gates. For a few seconds, the ship gives the barrier scale. Then it moves on toward Rotterdam, and the arms wait again. There is a strange emotional quality to machines built for disasters. You want them to be capable of everything and required for nothing. The Netherlands did not arrive at structures like this through abstract fascination with engineering. The reason lies farther south, in Zealand, and in a night when the North Sea pushed across defenses that people believed would hold. Even a test closure carries tension. Sirens, procedures, coordinated checks, traffic on the water halted or redirected, staff watching each stage. The barrier must prove that something this massive can move exactly when ordered. Most infrastructure is trusted because it works every day. Maesland is trusted because it can wait for years and still work on the right day. This is Maesland, engineering built to only when everything else depends on it. To understand why the country builds at this scale, we have to go to the place where memory became concrete. On the night of January 31st into February 1st, 1953, a severe North Sea storm drove water toward the coasts of the Netherlands, Belgium, and the United Kingdom. In the Netherlands, dikes failed in multiple places. Water rushed into low-lying communities. The disaster killed 1,836 people in the country and forced tens of thousands from their homes. Those numbers are enough. There is no need to decorate them. Go to Zealand now, and the landscape can be almost serene. Broad water, wind moving low cloud, fishing boats in protected channels, roads threading across islands and peninsulas. But the modern geography of the province is inseparable from what happened in 1953. The Dutch response became the Delta Works, a vast system of dams, sluices, dikes, storm surge barriers, and other defenses designed to reduce the risk of another catastrophe. Among its most famous structures is the Oosterscheldekering, the Eastern Scheldt Barrier, extending roughly 9 kilometers across the estuary. Instead of permanently closing the waterway, large movable gates can shut during dangerous conditions while allowing tides to continue under normal circumstances. That compromise matters. This is not a story of sealing nature outside. The Eastern Scheldt is an ecological system as well as a threat corridor. Engineers had to protect human life without erasing every tidal process that made the estuary what it was. And above all of it is weather. Strong northwesterly winds over the North Sea can drive water toward the Dutch coast. Wind direction, tide, atmospheric pressure, river discharge, invisible variables gather until water at a barrier is no longer just scenery. The wind drops for a moment. Water taps against concrete. Far away, a maintenance vehicle crosses the barrier. Nothing else moves. This is where the film's first question changes meaning. How do you build a country where the water keeps trying to take the land back? Not wondrously. The answer is not a single wall. It is monitoring, revision, maintenance, public institutions, new design and memory turned into infrastructure. And yet even this is not the strangest thing the Dutch have done to their own map. The human adaptation continues beyond the barrier itself. Houses, evacuation planning, strengthened dikes, forecasting, emergency communication, and local memory all form part of the same defense. A storm surge is not stopped by one famous structure. It is met by layers, each designed on the assumption that another layer may eventually be needed. This is Zeeland, where memory became infrastructure. North of here lies a structure that did not wait for a storm. It simply drew a line across open water and changed what counted as sea. 32 kilometers water on both sides. A road that should not be here. The Afsluitdijk runs across the northern Netherlands in a line so clean it seems almost abstract from the air. Cars and trucks move over it. Cyclists fight wind along it. On one side lies the Wadden Sea. On the other, the freshwater Risselmeer. Before the closure, this was part of the Zuiderzee, an inlet of the North Sea. The Afsluitdijk was completed in 1932, sealing off the Zuiderzee and transforming the inner water over time. The project reduced flood risk and prepared the way for further land reclamation. It also changed salinity, ecosystems, fisheries, settlement patterns, and the physical map of the country. This is what large infrastructure actually does. It solves one problem by creating a new landscape with new problems, new opportunities, and new responsibilities. Drive the dike, and the drama is oddly difficult to feel. The line is too straight. The horizon is too empty. The road surface looks ordinary. A windshield wiper moves. A cyclist leans into the wind. Somewhere below, water pushes against engineered edges that have been inspected and strengthened for generations. 40 kilometers per hour, 70, 90. The sea does not care. The structure works because people care continuously. The Afsluit reveals a recurring Dutch instinct towards scale. At Beemster, a lake became a grid. At Kinderdijk, wind moved water from one level to another. Here, an entire sea inlet was reorganized. But again, conquest is the wrong word. The Wadden Sea remains beyond the dike, tidal and alive. Storms still arrive, sea level still matters. The structure itself is being adapted for future conditions, because no engineering solution gets to declare the climate finished. There is humility inside all this control, whether the landscape admits it or not. Stand at a lookout, and the wind erases small sounds. A truck passes, then nothing but water and air. There is another consequence visible only after time. Fresh water accumulated behind the dike, while communities and economies adjusted to a new inland lake. The closure changed not just where water stood, but what kind of water it was. A line of engineering altered ecology and daily life together, proving again that redrawing a map is never a single-purpose act. This is Afsluitdijk, a horizon with a straight line drawn through it. And farther east in Friesland tells the same national story in a different language. Steam, oil, iron, and a deep mechanical rhythm from 1920 that still has not retired. Inside the DF Woerder steam pumping station, the Netherlands sounds different. No bicycle bells. No wind pushing reeds flat. Here there is metal, warm pipes, heavy flywheels, valves, pistons, the smell of machinery held inside brick walls. When the station operates, movement travels through the building in a steady mechanical pulse that feels almost physical in the chest. Opened in 1920 near Lemmer, the Woerder is the largest steam-powered pumping station ever built and remains capable of operating when high water conditions require additional pumping capacity. It belongs to an era when steam power was already mature, but its continued usefulness makes it more than an industrial monument. It still has a job. that changes how you look at everything inside. Museum machines are allowed to become silent. Working machines are judged by whether they start. An operator walks the floor, checking systems and listening to the building. This kind of work has always depended on senses as much as instruments. A slight change in vibration, a different sound from a bearing, heat where heat should not be. The machine communicates before anything fails dramatically. There is something about hearing a century-old pumping station begin to breathe. Call it engineering if you want. It does not quite cover it. The station sits within a much larger history of Friesland, managing excess water in low terrain. Rain falls, canals rise. Modern pumps do most of the routine work, but under certain conditions the old steam giant can still join the system. This is continuity in its most literal form, not nostalgia. The emotional peak is easy to overstate, so step back into something small. Condensation gathers on a window. A hand rests briefly on a railing warm from the room. Someone wipes oil from a tool. The flywheel keeps turning. Outside, the landscape remains flat and wet, as if none of this effort is happening. That may be the most Dutch image in the film. The machine works so the field can look uneventful. When high water threatens, the station's old architecture suddenly becomes present tense. Doors open, systems are prepared. Heat builds. Steam gathers, the building stops feeling like heritage and starts feeling like capacity held in reserve. That shift from admired relic to useful machine is what makes the place more moving than a silent museum ever could. This is Wouda, old machinery still arguing with water. Now leave the engines behind. Go north until the land stops pretending it is permanent, until roads end at ferries, until the tide begins deciding where the map can be walked. The Wadden Sea appears empty before it reveals how full it is. At low tide, water retreats and exposes huge expanses of mudflat and sand. Channels twist through the surface. Pools hold fragments of sky. A seal rests far from shore. Boots sink. Wind carries the smell of salt and mud across a horizon almost without vertical lines. Then the birds arrive. The Wadden Sea is the world's largest unbroken system of intertidal sand and mud flats. At certain times, millions of migratory birds use this region to rest, feed, and rebuild energy during journeys that connect continents. A landscape that looks vacant becomes one of the busiest ecological crossroads on Earth. Flat grey mud then wings everywhere. That is the ambush. Tides control the rhythm here more openly than anywhere else in the journey. On parts of the Wadden coast and around the islands, people move according to water tables and tide charts as naturally as urban commuters read train schedules. Mudflat guides watch the timing closely because a route that exists now may be covered later. Harbors change character over hours. Sandbanks emerge and return. The Netherlands has spent centuries making water obey boundaries. The Wadden Sea keeps moving the boundaries. Weather also feels less abstract here. North Sea wind has distance to build. It pushes against coats, rattles signs, turns conversations into fragments. The same broad atmospheric system that can raise dangerous water along the coast is experienced first as something very ordinary. Cold fingers. A hood pulled tighter, a bicycle leaned hard into a gust. Outside a small mudflat shelter, there is an old boot-cleaning brush fixed beside the door. No explanation, we keep walking. There is a phrase people often use for landscapes like this: untouched nature. That would be false. People have fished, sailed, built dikes, crossed channels, and altered the surrounding coast for centuries. What makes the Wadden Sea extraordinary is not absence of humans. It is the scale at which tidal processes still remain visible despite them. Mudflat walking makes the point physically. The ground that looks firm can soften under a boot. A distant channel can widen. The safe route is a temporary agreement between tide weather, local knowledge, and time. People who guide these crossings do not conquer the flats. They read them, and they leave before the water rewrites the path. This is the Wadden Sea, the Netherlands at the mercy of a clock no government controls. And beyond this tidal world lies the answer we have been carrying since the beginning. The island that lost its sea. Schokland looks wrong before you know why. A low ridge rises slightly above surrounding farmland. There are traces of old settlement, a church, remnants of a harbor, lines in the ground that do not make immediate sense. Fields stretch away in every direction. Tractors move where boats should be. Then the old map enters your mind. Schokland was once a peninsula and later an island in the Zuiderzee. Its communities lived with water on every side, exposed to storms, erosion, and the difficulty of making a life on a narrow piece of land. In 1859, the island was evacuated by government order because living conditions had become too dangerous. For decades after that, Schokland remained what its name implied, an island. Then the 20th century changed the surrounding world. After the Zuiderzee was closed by the Utrecht, and major reclamation projects reshaped the region, the Beemster Polder was drained. Water withdrew from around Schokland. The former island became part of a new mainland landscape. No explosion, no mountain rising from the sea. Just pumps, dikes, planning, years of work, and eventually farmland where waves had once moved. Now stand at the former harbor. No waves strike the old edge. A tractor works somewhere beyond it. Wind passes through grass where boats once came in. That is all. There should probably be a word for standing on an island surrounded by land. There is not one that feels sufficient. This is the answer to the mystery. How does an island lose its sea? But the island remains in memory, elevation, archaeology, old foundations, and the strange stubborn outline of a place whose geography has been reassigned. Schokland is more than an engineering curiosity. Archaeological evidence records human presence in this region, stretching back thousands of years. The site carries layers of settlement, adaptation, retreat, and return. It is a place where human beings repeatedly adjusted to changing water long before modern pumping stations and storm barriers existed. The irony is almost perfect. A community once left because the island had too much sea around it. Now visitors come because there is none. A bicycle passes on a road across the polder. The rider may not think about former waves under the fields. Most days, there is no reason to. That is the Dutch achievement and the Dutch warning in one image. Successful engineering makes impossible landscapes feel ordinary. Seen from above, the former island still interrupts the polder. Its slight elevation and old settlement traces resist the new geometry around it. The reclaimed fields are younger than the memory embedded on that ridge. One landscape has been written over another, but not completely. The earlier page still shows through. This is Schokland, proof that in the Netherlands, even geography can become history. By now, the Netherlands looks different. Amsterdam's canals are no longer only reflections and bridges. They are urban infrastructure made beautiful by centuries of use. The water defense lines are not quiet fields, but a military system written into elevation and sluices. Beemster is not simply farmland, but a former lake held in geometric order. Bollenstreek is not just color, but seasonal labor and community ritual. Utrecht's bicycles are not a national stereotype, but the result of deliberate transport design. Kinderdijk changes too. Once you understand what the mills were built to do, their blades stop being decoration. Maesland becomes less a piece of futuristic engineering than a promise made to millions of people living behind it. Zeeland's barriers become memory in concrete and steel. Afsluitdijk becomes a decision drawn across water. Woede becomes a working conversation between industrial history and present risk. The Wadden Sea becomes a reminder that not every boundary can be fixed. And Schokland becomes the final proof that the Netherlands has never simply occupied its geography. It has revised it. But there is one phrase we should resist. The Dutch conquered the sea. No conquest suggests completion. The Netherlands has never defeated water. It has negotiated with it. Amsterdam accommodates it. Beemster removes it. The water defense lines weaponize it. Kinderdijk lifts it. Maesland and Oosterschelde block it when necessary. The Wadden Sea lets it return. Schokland remembers where it used to be. The deeper truth is not domination. It is maintenance. That sounds less heroic. It is more interesting. A dike works because someone inspects it. A pump works because someone services it. A barrier works because models are updated, weather is watched, bolts are checked, budgets are approved, institutions remain functional, and people accept that yesterday's protection may not be enough for tomorrow's conditions. Even democracy enters the water. That is why elected water authorities make perfect sense here. In another country, voting about drainage levels can sound absurdly administrative. In the Netherlands, it belongs to the oldest question in the landscape. Who keeps the water where it needs to be? Climate change sharpens that question. Sea level rise, heavier rainfall, drought, and changing river flows mean Dutch water management become a museum of past victories. Protection now also means giving water space, adapting cities, and accepting that control has limits. There is a word for this relationship in every language: compromise. But the Dutch version is physical. You can stand on it, drive across it, cycle beside it, live below it. At the beginning, we asked how you build a country in a place where the water keeps trying to take the land back. The answer is not one dam, not one barrier, not one genius engineer. You build it with patience, with machines, with memory, with constant repair, with people willing to maintain structures they may never see tested at full force, and with enough humility to understand that the water never signed the agreement. Perhaps that is why the Netherlands feels so calm from a distance. The drama has been moved into systems. A canal gate closes, a pump starts. A tide table changes, a cyclist leans into rain. A miller listens to wood and gears. An engineer watches a storm forecast. A farmer drives across a lake that disappeared 4 centuries ago. Small actions for generations. This is not a country that escaped geography. It learned to live inside an argument with it. And if there is one image to carry away, let it be Schokland, an old island in the middle of fields, its former harbor facing crops, the sea absent, but not forgotten. The landscape says the impossible has already happened here. Quietly, thank you for traveling with us. If there is another country you think the world has misunderstood, leave its name below. And if you want to keep seeing familiar places differently, subscribe. We will meet again on the next journey.